police investigation after a triple murder here last night. This evening, police say they've located 26-year-old Kyle Clifford, who is wanted in connection with the deaths of 3 women killed in a suspected crossbow attack. Sky News pictures show the suspect being stretchered out of Lavender Hill Cemetery in Enfield in North London, an area which has seen a significant police presence throughout the afternoon, including armed officers. The 3 women killed in the attack have been named as Hannah, Louise and Carol Hunt, the wife and 2 adult daughters of the racing commentator John Hunt. The 3 were killed at a house in Hertfordshire last night. Police say they believe the suspect was known to the victims.
It is a nice, quiet suburban area. So yeah, a situation like this undoubtedly will be troubling for a lot of people.
Coming up, we'll have the very latest live from here at the scene and from Enfield after the triple murder suspect has been found by police. Good evening, thanks for joining us. Police say a man wanted over the deaths of 3 women here in Bushey in Hertfordshire has now been found. A major police manhunt was launched for 26-year-old Kyle Clifford after 3 women from the same family were killed in a suspected crossbow attack. Tonight, officers say he was traced to a location in North London and is currently receiving medical treatment, having been found with injuries. The victims have been named as 25-year-old Louise, 28-year-old Hannah and 61-year-old Carol Hunt, the wife and 2 daughters of the racing commentator John Hunt. Police say they believe the 3 victims were known to the suspect. Sky's Ashna Huranag reports now.
Almost 24 hours after the manhunt started, this was the moment police found Kyle Clifford, stretchered out of a cemetery in Enfield in North London by police and paramedics. The street search started when police found the bodies of 3 women at a house in a quiet suburban town of Bushey in Hertfordshire. The victims of a senseless crossbow attack were a mother and her daughters. 25-year-old Louise, her 28-year-old sister Hannah, and their mother, 61-year-old Carol Hunt. The 3 women are the wife and daughters of Sky Sports racing broadcaster John Hunt. Police and paramedics were called just after 7 on Tuesday evening, and neighbours have been shaken by events.
I got calls from other people saying that something tragic had happened. I only learned this morning that there was actually 3 women who had been brutally killed, which is horrific.
It's been a bit of a shock because it's a really residential area and there isn't, nothing much ever goes on round here at all.
Safia lives opposite the family and watched last night as emergency services descended on the street.
We were all very anxious. We were on edge all night, unable to sleep until the very early hours of the morning because we're just seeing a flood of blue lights, helicopters, sirens everywhere. We were all very scared.
Flowers have been laid at the cordon throughout the day. Many in the area knew Louise as the proud owner of a dog grooming business. Friends and clients have paid tribute, with one telling Sky News, Louise was the sweetest, kindest, most gentle person with the most lovely family. Louise would send me pictures of my dog asleep during grooming. That's how much of a wonderful and relaxing person Louise was. Now police have located their suspect. It's understood Clifford left the British Army at the end of 2022 after a brief period of service, and up until recently he was working as a private security guard. Clifford is now being treated in hospital as a family tonight is broken after losing 3 of their dearest members. Ashna Huranag, Sky News in Bushey.
And Ashna's here with me now in Bushey. In fact, Ashna, you've been here most of the day, and to say this place is normal is about the best way to describe it. It's leafy, it's the kind of place people live in if they're commuting into London to work every day, but there's been a slow trickle of people coming all day to drop off flowers. This was a family who was known quite well around here.
They were known quite well. As I mentioned in that piece there, Louise, the youngest of the daughters, which tragically ended up losing her life in such a horrendous way, owned a dog grooming business, one that was operating from outside their home, from inside their home, and lots of people use that service. We've been speaking to lots of her clients, and they used to bring their pets here and used to talked very fondly about her and the service they had and the friends that they had. And 4 women in the last few moments have been visibly upset and have been laying flowers here, and one of the cards just by one of those flowers says, "I wish none of this happened to you all, and I believe none of it should have been real. I wish I could hug you all, tell you how much you meant to me." And let's remember, this all began for people just over 24 hours ago now. The first they heard about it was the sirens, the blue lights outside their windows, and to learn of the horrors this morning, and in fact the suspect in this case was on the run, only added to that fear, I think.
Yes, the fact that someone was on the run, the fact that the police were talking about a manhunt and then taking the unusual step of revealing their details early on showed just how serious this was.
And people do talk, don't they, about the first 24 hours of any police investigation, particularly when it comes to an attempted murder investigation like this, or suspected murder investigation. They are vital hours for not only the police officer involved, but the major crime unit. And we know that Hertfordshire police were working in tandem with Metropolitan Police too, because it wasn't just the Hertfordshire area they were searching here around Bushey in this town, but further afield to North London too. We know that this suspect was from the Enfield area, and therefore all of that footage, the doorbell camera stuff, the kind of dash cam footage, CCTV, it all becomes incredibly relevant to their investigation. And I think they will be really, in hindsight, pleased with how quickly they managed to get hold of this person that they suspect to have committed this awful crime. But they are going to now, I suppose, take stock and reflect on exactly how this came to pass, because we know from being here all day there are a number of exits from beyond this cordon from that house, and I suppose in the last few moments of that having happened, they would have been tracing in what direction that suspect would have gone in. So a period of reflection no doubt will be had, but of course people's thoughts here, and understandably so, will be with the family. And people do talk about people here being very, very close. You know, you do get chatty with your neighbours. This is a there are lots of semi-detached properties, detached properties. It's an affluent area, lots of working professionals, many families. And in fact, in the last few moments, Matt, I was just talking to one friend of Louise's called Rohit, and he said, I used to see her down at the gym all the time, and described her as being the loveliest and the sweetest girl.
It's desperately sad. It's devastated lives, and it's disrupting others as well, as you can see with the police cordon, people coming and going from the street and coming to terms with what has happened to their neighbours. Ashna, thanks very much indeed for the time being. Sky's Rachel Venables is in Enfield in North London for us this evening, where, well, later this afternoon there was the culmination of that multi-agency search for this man. Rachel, just tell people what happened.
Well, this is where the manhunt ended, a manhunt that took nearly 24 hours, starting in Bushey, of course, where you are now. The scene of that absolute traumatising, horrifying crime last night. And it ended here, actually at a cemetery at Lavender Hill, very near to Gordon Hill in Enfield. And for several hours this afternoon, police officers, armed police officers, scoured the parkland around here, Hillyfield, which is an area that's really popular with local people, popular with joggers, with dog walkers, with local families who would have been walking through on what was a fairly nice sunny day, but would have seen huge groups of armed officers scouring the area, walking through the grassland, searching the bushes, the tree-covered areas, searching for any hint, any glimpse of Kyle Clifford. Of course, this morning they told us he was their suspect. He was the man they wanted to speak to over the deaths of those 3 women, Carol, Hannah and Louise, in Bushey last night. We know that Kyle is from the Enfield area. Police searching a property in the area this morning, and it ended here, as I mentioned, with the manhunt inside this cemetery, which is just behind me, still being guarded by police officers. We witnessed the huge flurry of armed officers suddenly standing guard, rushing in and out, picking up their weapons from the boots of their cars, ushering in paramedics. The London Air Ambulance Service was called, and also previously we'd seen how the fire brigade had sent up drones to help them search the area. And then pictures by Sky News showed Kyle Clifford actually being stretchered out of Lavender Hill Cemetery in this area and then taken on to hospital, where police said he's being treated for injuries. They said he was found with injuries and that, crucially, no shots were fired by police, despite the huge armed police presence that was here in Enfield today. As for the local people, a similar picture of real concern, real fear when they got that alert that police were searching for a man who might, they said, be armed with a crossbow. Local schools telling parents to pick up their children from primary school and walk them home rather than letting them head home on their own. So a real sense of relief when that manhunt ended. But of course, for the officers now, the real just arduous work begins as they try to piece together the evidence. We've seen forensic officers here. We've seen them, of course, operating in detail in that house in Bushey, and there'll be plenty other locations, no doubt, as well, as they try to piece together what led to this tragedy and try to work out what happened.
Rachel, thank you very much indeed. You're absolutely right. The huge operation continues. I mean, just in the past few minutes, we've seen police vehicles coming and going. We've seen a fire engine as well coming in the past hour as well, involved in taking a look at what happened here, part of the investigation there. Of course, messages of condolence have been posted on social media by people from across the racing world in support of the Hunt family. John Hunt, well known to people who like their horse racing because of his work on TV. A spokesperson for Sky Sports said everyone at Sky Sports Racing is deeply saddened by the tragic deaths in Hertfordshire, and our thoughts are with our colleague John Hunt, his family and friends at this awful time. ITV Racing commentator Matt Chapman wrote on social media that there were no words needed for what has happened to John Hunt and family today. Impossible to comprehend the pain, said Matt. Just know we are all here for you, John. We love you, pal. Racing loves you. And the Amateur Racing Association for Great Britain posted on Facebook the most shocking and horrifying news. All our thoughts and prayers with John and his family, to whom we send our love and deepest condolences. May God give them the strength to cope with this unimaginable tragedy. We can speak now to police commentator Graham Whettone, who's here with me now, extremely experienced sergeant in the Metropolitan Police. Graham, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here at the scene. This is a huge operation. It was a devastating crime that took place here last night, but subsequently so many officers, we've seen fire appliances as well, and paramedics too, involved in this.
I think it should show the urgency of the manhunt that was highlighted this morning. It's just over 24 hours ago that the police first attended, 7 o'clock last night, and then clearly they've established a prime suspect and released, unusually, his name and details this morning, and almost asked for a public appeal and put out a media appeal for him. So I think it just showed the urgency they wanted to locate this individual. But as we've seen, huge number of resources for Hertfordshire Police, huge investigation for them. We're working in conjunction with the Metropolitan Police in locating the suspects in North London.
When you saw them put out that photograph and the name, it was around about 8:30 this morning. Did you instantly realise this is more serious than normal?
I think, yes, if you've worked in policing, it's an unusual step to take for a senior investigating officer to decide to release the name of their prime suspect and an image. Is quite unusual. So I think it showed the urgency they felt this investigation needed, the manhunt, the search needed, was to get the information out there as soon as possible, get as many people aware of it, so as many people looking out for him, not just police officers, because normally it will be contained within, even within policing. So it wouldn't be all the response officers that would know about this, it would be within like the investigation team. So it wouldn't even go to the wider police family, so to speak. But this went a public appeal and a media appeal for him. So I think it just showed the urgency that they wanted to locate him, the seriousness of the incident, and how fast-paced his investigation was going to be moving. Yes.
There are some, sadly, all too familiar elements to this in terms of violence perpetrated against women, which we know is all too common. I'll be talking about that with an expert on that a bit later on. But some unusual elements too. The use of a crossbow in particular.
Yeah, that makes it very unusual. Those instances have been increasing slightly over the last few years, but again, an unusual weapon or implement to use, to bring with you, to carry out this sort of attack. So that again added element of interest for people, I think, for the media, for the public as well, for a crossbow being used in this type of incident as well. But other weapons were alluded to during the press conference by the senior officer earlier on as well. So, you know, all the information, all the evidence will come out in the fullness of time. But unusual to use that type of weapon, that type of implement in this type of attack.
Look, sadly, the women who were attacked were alive when they were found, but didn't survive and did die at the scene. What then happens in terms of the police investigation?
The scene gets left as it is. It sounds quite brutal, it sounds quite cold in some respects, but you have to then leave it as a crime scene. So your first priority is to save life. You let the paramedics come in and do their utmost, and they would try their utmost best, work for ages to try and get some life back, so they can then put them in an ambulance, stabilise them and get them as soon as possible to a hospital. Sadly, that didn't happen today. So as soon as they decide there is no more hope, then the scene gets sealed. The scene gets literally secured. The ambulance personnel would stand up, walk away. They leave everything they brought into the house where it is. They leave all their kit and belongings there, walk away, and then it becomes a crime scene for the investigation team to come in and take over.
And then, as we've talked about, the investigation, well, the manhunt, it carries on from that, but also the investigation to what happened here at the scene. When we look around here, and like many residential streets, people have video doorbells, they have cameras up and that kind of thing. There'll be a lot of evidence around here.
There is, and that may have been paused. That element of the investigation may well have been paused while the manhunt, while the search for the suspect goes on. You have to prioritise, and with the resources you've got, you have to prioritise it, which might have been one of the deciding factors for them to go public so early with the suspect. But now they can start. There was, I think, some house-to-house inquiries gone on initially, but they will want to track his movements to this area last night, and then how he left the area. So what form of transport he used to get here, and that's why the public appeal has still gone out. If anybody's got any footage at all of who they believe is a suspect, contact the police and give it to them. They will want to track his movement into this area, and then how he left as well. So you're trying to put the suspect at the location where the incident took place. You're trying to piece it all together, evidentially, for justice proceedings.
Look, people watching may not be familiar with the geography around here. Where we are in Bushey in Hertfordshire is northwest of London. It's still within the M25. It still feels like London suburbs, and a lot of people will commute here. And where the suspect was found is northeast London. Enfield is a London borough as well, which actually just begs the question, Graham, how the different police forces interact. It was Hertfordshire Police who picked this up originally, but then other forces, Metropolitan Police, who you used to work for, ultimately involved as well.
Yeah, I think it just shows the way the forces are working. You know, the Herts are a relatively smaller force, so they work in conjunction with Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire for their major investigation team. They've combined their experienced detectives to deal with serious cases like this. But clearly the information they had, and the suspect comes from Enfield, which is within the Metropolitan Police area. This area used to be part of the Met, just down the road. So the two forces, and the officers, we were well used to working together and alongside each other. They would back each other up at different incidents. So although the names are slightly different, they are part of the policing family. So they'll be well used to working together. Radio systems very similar. They can communicate with each other and share information, as we've seen today.
We are seeing these aerial shots from the cemetery in Enfield, where Kyle Clifford, the 26-year-old who was being searched for most of the day by police, was eventually apprehended. He was injured. No shots were fired, which I'm sure you'll be glad to hear, Graham, given the difficulties that come with armed police using their weapons. But an ambulance was on scene, paramedics were there, and Kyle Clifford was then taken to the Royal London Hospital, where he is being treated for injuries. Just a final word on what happens next, Graham. You know, he is effectively in custody, but he's still in hospital at the same time.
Yeah, actually buy some time with the investigation team, because his detention clock doesn't start till he gets to the police station. So he'd have gone straight from this location to a hospital. So until he actually reaches the police station, the clock doesn't start ticking for him in relation to how long you can detain him before you charge somebody. So they've got a little bit more time, but it looks like it's been a very fast-paced investigation anyway. It's moved very quickly. Scene's still secure and locked down, and it will be for some time, and guarded for some time while they go through the forensic stuff. But he will stay in hospital until he's fit enough to be released into police custody. Then he'll go into a police station, and then the interview process will start.
Graham, for now, thank you very much indeed. Well, still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll have some of the day's other news, including Sir Keir Starmer's first international trip as Prime Minister as he attends the 75th NATO summit in Washington.
Three, two, one.
We've got an election, haven't we?
We'll start with the rehearsals.
Let's do that again, one more time.
You've got to be the best, but that is quite a lot of pressure.
It's just keeping up with everything.
You don't know what's going to happen day to day.
And being forcibly removed.
You've got to beat your journalistic competition. Every day matters.
That was a very tense interview, and I'm still slightly shaking.
You train hard and you fight easy, and I think that's what we're doing.
When you cover big, tense protests, there's almost always a moment when the atmosphere changes. There's a different noise, and you start to smell tear gas in the air.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
When we spoke to the fishermen down in Cornwall, all the politics from Westminster was a million miles away. This was about their jobs, their livelihoods.
Welcome back. The Prime Minister is in the US for the 75th NATO summit on his first international trip since taking over at number 10. Sir Keir Starmer has met the US President Joe Biden and other NATO leaders today, pressing allies to increase their defence spending. The PM has also stressed the need for unity, including locking in support for Ukraine. As Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, reports.
A newly minted Prime Minister, fresh from victory and now on the world stage.
The Right Honourable Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Here to take his place for another celebration, NATO's 75th anniversary.
Prime Minister, good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
And here to reassure this leader, Britain remains steadfast when it comes to supporting Ukraine.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for looking after Defence Secretary the other day.
Thank you very much.
What has changed is the flurry of activity. The new Defence Secretary's already been to Kyiv. Arriving at the summit from meetings with counterparts to join other world leaders, this will feel a long way from the UK campaign trail.
Very good bilateral meetings that we've had an opportunity to make sure that those relationships are reset, for me to be able to say that our position on the world stage, leading on issues like defence and security, on climate change, and on energy are so important. So a really good opportunity. But now we go on and do the work in Council.
This NATO gathering designed to both celebrate the longevity of the alliance and show strength and solidarity with Ukraine. Allies agreeing Kyiv's path to NATO membership is now irreversible. Keir Starmer's own path to power now putting him at the right-hand side of the US president. It was but a week ago that we were with Sir Keir Starmer in Wales at a farm for one of his last election rallies. Fast forward a few days and he's here now at NATO in Washington, rubbing shoulders with world leaders. So much has changed for him in but a few days, and it's changed for all of us too. But what hasn't changed is his approach to NATO and Ukraine. In many ways, Sir Keir Starmer is continuity Sunak, with the new Prime Minister promising a cast iron guarantee to lift defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. What the new Prime Minister won't do is say when he'll meet the target, unlike his predecessor. But in an increasingly uncertain world, continuity from this man warmly welcomed. This, then, a good start. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Washington.
Two children who went to the same primary school in Liverpool, which closed because of a Giardia outbreak, have both died. The children, said to be aged 5 and 6, were pupils at the Milstead Primary School in the Everton area. Health officials say the deaths are unlikely to be related to a number of cases of the gastric infection at the school. In a statement, the school's head, Michelle Beard, paid tribute to the students, saying the entire Milstead school community is devastated to have learned of the sad recent passing of two of our younger children. We have sent our sincerest condolences to both of their families. Both children filled their classes with joy during their time with us, and they will forever be in our hearts. We are working closely with our families, staff and pupils to support them as we come to terms with this terribly sad news. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll have the latest as police say they've found the man wanted in relation to the murder of 3 women here in Hertfordshire. Welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. We're live here in Hertfordshire, in Bushey, in fact, where police say the search for a man wanted over a triple murder has now come to an end. The 3 victims killed in a suspected crossbow attack here have been named as Carol, Hannah and Louise Hunt, the wife and 2 adult daughters of racing commentator John Hunt, known for his work on the BBC and on Sky Sports. The suspect, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford from North London, has been found by police, bringing an end to a major manhunt today. Sky News pictures show Kyle Clifford being stretchered out of Lavender Hill Cemetery, that's in Enfield in North London, an area which has seen a significant police presence throughout the afternoon, including armed officers. Clifford was seen receiving medical treatment in the cemetery, which is close to his home. Sky News understands he was then taken to the Royal London Hospital for treatment. Residents in the area where the 3 women were killed, here in Bushey, have started laying flowers next to the police cordon, many of them coming throughout the day and many of them in tears, understandably shaken by what has happened.
Suddenly you notice there was police outside in black uniform with sort of semi-automatic guns walking around. So I initially thought it might be terrorists or something, but that's all I can say. And then they were here all last night. Everything's been blocked off and everything's been going on, but it's been a bit of a shock because it's a really residential area.
Well, look, it's horrific. I came yesterday in the evening after my wife called me several times. She was like panicking what's happening. There was a dozen police cars down the road, so she's asking what's going on. I obviously came a bit later, then I got calls from other people saying that something tragic had happened. I only learned this morning that there was actually 3 women who had been brutally killed, which is horrific.
I just think if someone is able to freely walk around with a weapon such as a crossbow or even knives, which are so easily accessible, it really begs the question, where is safety for the public? You know, how can any of us feel safe going out in broad daylight? It was still light outside. So if we're not able to walk freely in our own communities and neighbourhoods, then why would we feel safe going out even at night as a woman?
That's the reaction of people here in Bushey in Hertfordshire today. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Aisha Gill, who's a professor of criminology and works with Hertfordshire Police on violence against women and girls. Aisha, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate that. We can't talk about the specifics of this case, except to say when people see that 3 women have been killed, it will resonate with them because of the amount of violence that is perpetrated against women throughout the country. Give us your reaction to what's happened.
Yeah, I think we are in a state of emergency. You know, women killed by a man every 3 days in the UK. You know, violence against women, domestic violence makes up 18% of all recorded crimes in England and Wales. And we have a lot of work to do in terms of addressing the pernicious forms of misogyny, sexism, violence in our streets, in our homes, online. And, you know, we have to recognise that you know, more work needs to be done to reduce fatal violence against women and girls. But we also need to address the violence that occurs. That these kinds of crimes, these pernicious crimes, don't occur out of the blue. And we need to kind of look at, you know, the everyday normalisation of violence against women, patriarchal domination, impunity of state institutions in terms of failing victims, in terms of bringing justice and accountability to victims and their families. And, you know, obviously the rates of violence as activists, we are alarmed and enraged every single day, but we need to pay attention to the continual rising of these crimes. And I think it's a kind of profound reminder that, you know, that where women and girls, you know, stand up to sexism, misogyny, structural forms of racism in relation to gender-based inequalities, whether that's in the home or on our streets, saying it's enough is enough. If women step out of line, you know, they are punished by some men who use their, you know, hegemonic masculinity to discipline And those threats of violence, whether that's in London or in the north of England, no area in the UK is free from gender-based violence. And I do think, we are making some inroads around prevention. On the fact that we have a new government in place now, I really hope that we do see a greater accountability in terms of disrupting, the spheres of male privilege, for example, that allows for this kind of violence to take place in our communities.
Look, Aisha, I mean, nobody wants any violence perpetrated against anybody, of course, but when we talk a lot about violent crime, we're talking about things like knife crime, which for the most part, not always, but for the most part, are male-on-male crimes. Do you think that focus overshadows what is going on with violent crime against women?
I think we need to look at the intersectional aspects of violence in all our communities across gender. But one thing that's really clear to me is that there just doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency. Often lessons are learnt, or there's reviews when there's significant cases that are brought to the public attention. And I do think on that basis, I think we need to really pay attention in terms of how we're supporting victims, and we're holding perpetrators to account in saying that, your violence is unacceptable, and, there has to be accountability. And I know from, if we look at cases like Zara Alina, 2 years ago, failure to share intelligence, accurately assessing risk, structural barriers in terms of systemic forms of racism. Our government has new governments in place and has pledged to bring about change, but I don't think words require action. And I do think there has been an overemphasis on certain types of crimes, but we're still not doing enough in terms of addressing the pernicious forms of violence against women in our communities. And let me remind your viewers, every 3 days a woman is murdered. And those kind of figures in the data from femicide census for 2023, 100 cases of domestic homicide, 70 of those were women.
Look, Aisha, we've got a new government in now, and there are many members of that government have been quite vocal in speaking up for women's rights, of course, ministers now who are in that government doing that kind of thing. If you could talk to them, if you could ask them to do things, perhaps early intervention, perhaps doing something in schools, what would it be?
Well, I think we all need a whole systems approach. It's not just in our schools, it's across our communities. It's disrupting those who are in positions of power, whether that's in medical institutions, in our military, in our police, in our religious institutions. I would like to see a multi-pronged approach around prevention, provision and protection. And I also would like to see a greater accountability to address mistrust across our criminal justice system, because we are still today failing victims, believing victims and responding to ensuring that safety and justice translates for all women and girls in our communities. I mean, I appreciate that, the public and our communities are galvanized when there are particular high-profile cases that are brought to our attention. But we need to ensure that our responses are robust every day of the week, 365 days of the year.
Aisha, just before we finish, one final question. I said there that you work with the Hertfordshire force. We're in Hertfordshire now as well, without again talking about specifics. Yes. You have done, you have to. But in doing that, are you optimistic that police forces are getting better at dealing with violence against women?
There's some really fantastic police officers that I've worked with across Hertfordshire Police. There are pockets of success, and there is an investment by the police crime commissioners in the area and across England and Wales to kind of invest commit, put in place cohesive strategies that it's not just top down but bottom up. But we still have a fragmented response, and I think there's more work to be done in terms of engaging our criminal justice agencies with specialist services as well, who are at the front line of responding to gender-based violence in our communities at the moment.
Dr. Aisha Gill, really appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you very much. I'm joined once more by police commentator Graham Wesson, who's here with me in Bushey in Hertfordshire. Let's just pick up that theme a little bit, Graham, in terms of how police have evolved in dealing with violence against women, because well, look, we know recently, right, certainly with the Metropolitan Police, there have been those incidents which would perhaps distract, and understandably so, from some of the good work that's been going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, huge amount of good work going, and lots of dedicated officers working tirelessly to combat violence against women and girls, and it's a priority for policing. It's highlighted often. I've spoken to lots of officers who focus seriously on dealing with protecting victims, safeguarding victims, making sure safeguarding measures are in place. Occasionally there's some that aren't as diligent as they could or should be. That needs stopping, that needs preventing, but it's just about risk and threat assessment and understanding that you know, sometimes there are people that will commit awful acts against somebody else, having been in a relationship with them. And I think it's just managing that, understanding it and realising it, and focusing your priorities on it when you can.
There will be people watching saying, yes, but police forces have institutional issues, they're deep-rooted. I mean, how can they evolve from that? Because, you know, you certainly think about issues like Stephen Lawrence, for example. You know, there are still ramifications for that now, 30 years later. So when it comes to how seriously forces up and down the country take violence against women, I mean, are you optimistic that things can move in the right direction?
I am, because I still speak to serving officers, I speak to investigators, so seeing and hearing the work that's going on, I am optimistic. It's moving forward, it's progressing, it's getting much better. It needs to get even better still to stop those incidents that happen that we read about and see about all the time. But I'm confident that the policing is working in the right direction. They just need more resources, and they also need the resources that can safeguard victims when incidents happen. So preventative measures, preventative resources, etc., refuges. So that comes from government funding. You know, some of these aspects aren't totally with the police. The investigative side is, but some of the preventative measures and the safeguarding measures sit outside policing. So policing is working with partner agencies, but they all need funding and resources to actually properly safeguard people.
Well, let's just finish with the here and now. We're here in Bushey in Hertfordshire, of course, because of the devastation of 3 lives that were taken here last night. 3 women murdered, devastation for the family, and John Hunt, who is the racing commentator that many people will know, of course, their father and husband. What happens next with the investigation? It's not going to be over quickly, I would imagine.
No, a slower process. Now, the priority was to locate the suspects and detain him. They've done that. That was priority for today. The investigation will continue. The scene will stay secure. The forensic teams will probably be back tomorrow, and we'll take the time to go through the whole house. They will try and track the suspects' movements coming here. That's why the appeal is still going out for people. You walk around here, you see video cameras, doorbell cameras, etc., dash cams on cars. So trying to keep people aware of this and say, if you have got any footage, you still need to get it. People coming home from work today, have a look, see if you actually got the suspect walking past your house, if they're coming towards here or leaving. They'll be trying to build a picture of how he came here and how he left, so they can put it all together. That's now part of the evidential chain they're trying to gather.
Graham, thank you so much. It is time for some of today's other news now, and an analysis of hundreds of conspiracy theory accounts on the messaging app Telegram has revealed their interactions with Reform and other political parties throughout the election campaign. Sky News data and forensics team found that Nigel Farage and the Reform Party attracted a surge of interest among conspiracy theory and nationalist groups, as our online campaign correspondent Tom Cheshire explains.
Throughout the general election campaign, we were looking at the online campaign, and these were the main battlegrounds. Platforms like TikTok, like Instagram, like X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook, they're all public-facing. They all have content moderation. So the companies there, they remove posts that violate their guidelines. But there is a smaller social media platform which doesn't do that, Telegram. More or less anything goes in terms of free speech here. It's full of closed groups you have to join. And there's no content moderation, free speech bastion really. So it's home to groups that might get removed from those platforms over there, particularly for conspiracy theorist and nationalist groups. Now, we worked with an open source intelligence agency called PROS to monitor more than 900 Telegram accounts connected to conspiracy theories. Between them, they have more than 15 million followers, although some of those may be double counted. Now, this shows the volume of chatter around the start of the general election. You can see this is around Labour and Conservatives, a big spike here when it's announced, but it's fairly, they're not that interested as it happens. But then something else happens, and we bring in reform. In particular, you can see that in the light blue there colours, this huge spike. This huge spike is when this man over here, Nigel Farage, announces that he is going to be a candidate who returns as leader of Reform. Now, some people saw this as an opportunity to recruit, as in this group. They've mimicked the Reform banners there. And then you've got other things like this. Whether it's Dems or Nons, we'll still be posting about Q, which is a conspiracy theory, and tying it all into Reform UK anyway. So they're trying to get traffic from that. Now, the QAnon conspiracy theory states that Donald Trump is fighting a powerful group of Satan-worshipping paedophiles. Their supporters were part of the crowd that stormed the US Capitol in 2020. Or they went the other way around. This is one conspiracy account encouraging people to sign up to be candidates for Reform in the next set of local elections. Now, this is what Nigel Farage was doing during the campaign. This is a tweet from him saying that Reform UK will reject the influence of the World Economic Forum and cancel Britain's membership of it. Britain isn't a member of it. The WEF is a pretty niche topic, yet he repeated this tweet on election day itself. And let's take another tweet that Nigel Farage made around election interference. Now, he made this claim throughout the campaign. You can see here, Ofcom are engaging in election interference. Their new rules will only give UK 8% of the coverage. Now, he made this claim about various bodies during this. And both of those set conspiracy groups ablaze. The WEF is one of the arch villains for the conspiracy theory groups who believe it is trying to impose a totalitarian world government as part of what they call the Great Reset. You can see it here. And then you get things like this when he's got talk of interference. It's the first time we've really seen this in the UK, and it continued after the results were announced. It seems this is going to be a running theme. And there's also a lot of crossover between conspiracist and right-wing nationalist groups on Telegram in general. And they mainly came out for Reform. Tommy Robinson, he said that Reform was the only option at the election. The leaders of Patriotic Alternative and Britain First, which are successor organisations to the British National Party, or BNP, also encouraged their supporters to vote Reform. Now, we put all of that to Reform, but we didn't hear anything back. And it's worth pointing out that Reform, because it is on Telegram, can't control what's in those groups. Nevertheless, they were very, very vocal in terms of who they were supporting.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight. While England's footballers look to reach the final of the Euros, the men at least, England cricketer Gus Atkinson made a dream debut at Lord's today against the West Indies.
Well, over the longer term, 80% of our butterflies are in decline, which obviously means when we have poor springs and, as we're seeing now, a poor summer start, this can exacerbate, this can lead them to be less resilient to these changes in our climate and our weather. So at the moment, we're going through what is known as the June gap, but this is prolonged due to the dull spring and the dull summer weather that we've had so far. As I said, if there were more of them, they'd be a lot more resilient. They can cope with the vagaries of the British weather. However, this year it's a little bit more difficult for them because it's been so wet and so cold. They're they're cold-blooded insects, so they need the warmth from the sunshine to stimulate their muscles, to get them mobile and get them out there feeding and breeding, which is what they should be doing. But when the weather's dull like it is at the moment, they're too busy roosting. It's roosting. They're taking shelter as we do when the weather's poor. So they're taking shelter and they're not feeding and breeding, which will have knock-on effects for the next generation. Well, you wouldn't believe it at the moment, but this is the peak butterfly season. Most species are on the wing at the moment. So species like the peacock, the red admiral, the garden's favourite, the small tortoiseshell. Some of the blues should be around as well, the holly blue, the Oh, crikey, what's its name? The holly blue and the common blue. They should all be around, zipping around our gardens at the moment, but it's a little bit of a slow start for them. Well, there's lots we can do to improve it. So we can improve our gardens and our allotments and our balcony spaces by establishing what's known as a wild space. It's a campaign that Butterfly Conservation are running. So this involves growing larval food plants, so caterpillar food plants, and providing nectar sources in your garden. They are very, very sensitive indicators of environmental change. So as our climate changes and as our climate warms, the butterflies are moving around as a result of this, and they are known as what's known as indicator species. So they can be indicative of the health of our wider environment.
Welcome back. Time now to get all the sport with Teddy.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Welcome to the Red Bull Technology Campus. In 15 months' time, they will be running an engine in F1 that they have built here. Are they ready?
3 years ago, this place was a building site. Now it's a fully functioning power unit design and manufacturing base.
Any of you guys from Mercedes before coming here? Yeah.
Of a total staff of approaching 500, 220 engineers and other staff were recruited from the Mercedes Brixworth engine operation.
Okay.
Ford have also contributed personnel and are already manufacturing parts and supplying test systems. They plan to do more. For Ford, it's a return to F1, having sold their Jaguar team to Red Bull in 2004. Their global head of motorsport performance is Mark Rushbrook.
Well, it was clear even then, right, the mission that you were already on before we joined, and complementing with, I think, the right resources that we can bring to it to carry it on. And Christian Hertrick and I are here about once every month, once every 6 weeks. And you can visibly see the improvements and the iterations of the hardware every time we're here.
This was the first engine the Red Bull factory produced. Late Red Bull owner Dietrich Mateschitz heard it fire up before he passed away. Every power unit serial number from now on will carry his initials. Power units for the 2026 season will be 50% internal combustion.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Teddy, thank you very much indeed. Now, it's a balcony we associate with some of the most iconic moments in royal history, and now visitors will be able to tour the rooms behind the famous facade of Buckingham Palace. Known as the East Wing, it's the most photographed part of the building, but don't expect to be able to wave to tourists below, as the glass doors will remain locked during the guided tour. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills has more.
It's been the stage for so many historic moments. One of the most famous balconies in the world. And for 175 years, a view that was reserved just for the royal family and their guests. Until now, with the centre room behind it open for us to see for the very first time.
It might seem a bit strange when you're in a palace, but actually this room feels smaller than you'd expect because it's where the royal family get together, they mingle, they have a chat on those big occasions before those doors are then opened and they get to go out and see the public. Now, for the visitors, those doors are going to stay shut, but at least they get to have a peek through the curtains.
While this will no doubt be the showstopper room with the incredible Lotus chandelier, it is just part of an exclusive tour around the East Wing that was added by Queen Victoria. Only now open to the public after 5 years of looking more like this. With 47,000 floorboards removed and relaid, this wallpaper in the yellow drawing room had to be taken down, cleaned and rehung, along with 3,500 priceless pieces. The principal corridor, just one of the spaces where Caroline de Guito helped get them back on display.
It also tells the story of history, the history of collecting, right back to George IV,
And many of the contents that are in this wing came from Brighton Pavilion, his pleasure palace down on the south coast. But also it tells us a lot about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and the way that they had this wing built and the way that they occupied and used it, because many of the pieces that we see here have been here literally since the wing was completed in 1850.
While tours for the East Wing are now sold out, general tickets will still get you into the staterooms, so you can decide for yourself if you like the King's new portrait. A man who is continuing his mother's tradition of opening the palace, and in fact has agreed it can be open for more days. Conscious, it would seem, of the need to justify the public money that's being spent and to capitalise on the interest that never seems to fade. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News, at Buckingham Palace.
OK, time now for a quick look at the weather. And the next few days look drier for most, but there will still be showers around. And there's a chance of more general rain in the south and northeast later on. Southern parts and the northwest of Scotland look mostly fine this evening, but there'll be a risk of showers elsewhere, some heavy and thundery. Northeast Scotland will see more general rain easing. Eastern Scotland and central Britain will remain largely overcast and fairly mild tonight with a little patchy rain, but it will turn dry, clear and cool just about everywhere else. The wind will ease away from northern coasts. Central Britain will stay quite cloudy with a bit of patchy rain tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, it'll be mostly dry and quite sunny, but the odd light shower can't be ruled out, while northeastern Scotland will be slow to brighten. Just before we go, a reminder of our developing news here on the UK Tonight. Police say the search for a man wanted over a triple murder that happened here in Bushey in Hertfordshire last night has come to an end. The 3 victims killed in a suspected crossbow attack have been named as Carol, Hannah and Louise Hunt, the wife and 2 adult daughters of racing commentator John Hunt. The suspect, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford from North London, has been found by police, bringing an end to a major manhunt. Sky News pictures show Kyle Clifford being stretchered out of Lavender Hill Cemetery in Enfield, an area which saw a significant police presence throughout the afternoon, including with armed officers. Clifford could be seen receiving medical treatment in the cemetery, which is close to his home. That's all from us for this evening. Yalda is back next with The World.